Nobody worried about him. He came to me, you know what I'm saying, on some disrespectful stuff. You know what I'm saying? The game over with. You still mad because I was locking you up? All right, go sleep on that. I ain't trying to hear that after the game.
So you vowed that he wouldn't get in your head. But you managed to get in his head, do you think?
What you think? You tell me. You tell me. Anytime I lined up on him. Yeah, y'all go watch that. Y'all go watch that. Y'all tell me who got in who head. He came up to me after the game. You feel me? Y'all tell me who got in who head. You an old man acting like that.
One of the picks, it was kind of some pushing and shoving. I came in kind of, hey, push, shove a little bit, and all of a sudden, bang, I got hit in the back. And I kind of fell. As they say, old man, I fell over. I didn't have a hard time getting up, but I got up. And he said, I'm not scared of you. I said, okay, cool. I'll see you after the game. I'm not scared of you. Okay, so I went to public school, SKOOL. So that means you understand what I'm talking about. So after the end of the game, I had a little chit-chat with him. He didn't have anything to say. Get in the locker room, he's talking.
That was Steve Smith on Mike and Mike today, responding to Jalen Ramsey, calling him an old man after the two got in a heated exchange in the Ravens' 1970 win on Sunday. Stephen A., did Ramsey cross the line with his comments?
I believe he did. And I'm a big-time fan of Jalen Ramsey. I think he's going to be a superstar in this league. Got mad respect and love for him. But respect your elders. Steve Smith has been in this league for a long time. He's got 977 receptions, over 14,000 yards, potentially a future Hall of Famer. He's been around a long time. It doesn't matter, what y'all vibing back and forth. On the field is one thing, but to go into the locker room and spout out to the media the kind of things you were saying about him like that, you got a whole career ahead of you, and you got to hope and pray you're going to have half that career just because of the physicality alone and whether or not you stay healthy. Just show some respect.
I love Steve Smith. Tough guy. Last guy you want to talk to that way. In the locker room, out, whatever. And yet Jalen Ramsey did it. And he did this after talking about Aaron Rodgers disrespectfully. And I'll tell you, Jalen Ramsey, he doesn't have to hear from me. You keep doing it. Jalen Ramsey's time is not like in the future sometimes. He's letting people know it's right now. Forget about respecting anybody. Right. Disrespect everyone. Beat him on the field with your play. This is one of the reasons a lot of people thought he was the best defensive player in the draft, period.
Yeah, but at Florida State, you didn't hear him talking like that after the game. I'm just saying, there's a level of decorum and respect. You're a professional now. And by the way, you lost. Your team is winless. Your coach, if he doesn't shape up, Gus Bradley going to get himself fired, okay? You might have a different coach. Politics might get in the way. You might get sabotaged because you might get a joke for a coach to succeed, Bradley.
All Jalen Ramsey is saying is you ain't going to beat me in your matchup, period. I don't care who you are.
But that's not all he's saying. What he's doing is he's denigrating an individual who has a career that you hope to have. You're a rookie.
He's not worried about his whole careir. He's worried about that day when he locked him up.
That don't make him right.
That day when Aaron Rodgers didn't want to throw to that side of the field.
It don't make him right.
Oh, it
don't make him right.
If that's being wrong, I don't want to be right.
Well, you know what?
Loving that is wrong. I don't want to be right.
Well, we'll see what happens.
LSU's got to get up there quickly, be ready to snap. Into the end zone. Touchdown! The Tigers roar! DJ Chark may have just saved LSU's season and Les Miles' job.
The offense did not get the snap off.
We have had a cataclysmic reversal for LSU. Auburn are the victors. Have you ever seen such a swing of emotions?
It's been a rough weekend for LSU football, to say the least. First, they lose a heartbreaker to rival Auburn on Saturday. And on Sunday, Les Miles was fired after 12 seasons as head coach. LSU is expected to contend for a national championship this season. But a 2-2 start was enough to bring about the end of Miles. The Mad Hatter went 114-34 at LSU, the second most victories in school history. He coached the Tigers to a national title in 2007. Offensive coordinator Cam Cameron was also fired. Defensive line coach Ed Ogeron has been named interim head coach. We now welcome in ESPN's college football guru, Paul Feinbaum. Paul, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Molly.
Paul, why this move at this time for LSU?
I think it became inevitable that he wasn't going to make it, and there's almost a new axiom in college football, and really in a lot of sports for that matter. If it becomes inevitable, why not do it immediately? It seems cruel, it seems harsh, but this school did not want Les Miles to return in 2015 and 2016 anyway. Remember last year, they pretty much fired Les Miles. They offered the job behind his back to Jimbo Fisher. It went back and forth for a couple of days leading into the final regular season weekend, and at the last minute on Friday of Thanksgiving week, Fisher pulled out. They were stuck with Les Miles. He won the game against Texas A&M, and the president, the AD, everyone did an about-face. They announced that he was coming back at that rather stilted news conference. And, you know, you would have expected Les Miles with a new lease on life to change things, but he retained Cam Cameron, who was the much maligned offensive coordinator. They did the same thing that they were doing last year that nearly got them both fired, and they got exposed against Wisconsin and then Saturday night against Auburn, one of the worst teams in the SEC West. Auburn did not even score a touchdown, 5 field goals, and then you saw the clock management disaster at the end. The school said, why wait? Let's dump him, be done with it, and start looking for a new coach.
Paul, great to have you on the show.
Thanks,
how do you explain the hard-headedness of Les Miles? Because everybody's been talking for at least the last couple of years, if not longer, about his unwillingness to change, particularly when you consider the willingness of Nick Saban to adapt, along with other coaches. How do you explain how thick-headed this guy appeared to be, knowing that there were people calling for his job?
Stephen, you can't. Not to quote Einstein this early in the morning, but we've all heard it. If you keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same results. That's the definition of insanity. And I'm not saying Les Miles is insane. He was just too stubborn. And I think he thought that Leonard Fournette was going to get him over the hump. But Fournette got banged up against Wisconsin. He was a shell of his former self, even though he got 100 yards or a little bit more against Auburn. And I just don't understand it. And I think last year he so resented the administration trying to fire him that he said, you know what, I'll show you. I'll keep Cameron and do it my way. And we all know it didn't work. And there were a couple other aspects of this. You know, he lost to Nick Saban every year since 2011. Go back to 2011 for a second, guys. Les Miles was undefeated. He won the SEC championship. He beat Nick Saban at his own place in a 1-versus-2 late-season showdown. And what happened? He had to play Saban again in the national championship game, shut out 21-0, and it hasn't been the same since.
So how much of it is stubbornness as it relates to Cameron, Paul, who, I mean, if you're going to blame a team for lack of offensive imagination when you got a running back like that, maybe you get rid of the offensive coordinator first, then see how the head coach does. And how much of it is, as you alluding to, simply the fact that he's not Nick Saban? I mean, he has won a championship. He's won a whole, like 3-4 times more games than he's lost. How much of this is simply that he's not Nick Saban?
Max, that's exactly it. And for those who don't remember, Nick Saban was at LSU. He won a national championship in 2003. Les came in, replaced Saban when Saban went to the Dolphins. A couple years later, he won the national championship. And what did everyone say down in Louisiana? He won with Saban's players, even though it wasn't completely accurate. Les was a great recruiter. He just never could develop a quarterback. And ultimately, it got him. But back to your question about Nick Saban, that's what everyone is going to say in the SEC and around college football. If you're not Nick Saban, you're probably not going to survive, at least in this conference, because Nick Saban has ruled it. We all know 4 out of the last 7 national championships, and clearly #1 this year.
Paul, obviously I'm no college football aficionado like yourself, but I hear things that I hear. And let me tell you what I hear and throw it your way. Even though Orgeron is the interim coach, and obviously he has an LSU pedigree, and we know what he did at USC, we know all of that, you're also hearing the name Lane Kiffin, because that's somebody they could potentially be interested in succeeding Les Miles at LSU next year and beyond, which plays in part to some degree as to why Steve Sarkisian is now at Alabama, because even though he's just doing broadcast work, he could end up succeeding Lane Kiffin as the offensive coordinator in Alabama once Kiffin leaves for LSU. What can you tell us as to whether or not there's any truth to that whatsoever?
I think Kiffin is someone to watch. It's interesting that Orgeron was on his staff, and I can see a scenario that they bring Kiffin in. Orgeron stays, does the recruiting. He's a great recruiter. He's just not much of a head coach. He bombed out at Ole Miss about 15 years ago. Yeah, I think it's possible, and it's the LSU way. What do you accomplish? You get an offensive mind, someone who has led Alabama back to prominence, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because Alabama slipped for 2 years and didn't win the national championship, and that's not being prominent in that program. And you also get under Nick Saban's skin, and I think it would. So I think that's something at work here. I don't think Kiffin would be the first choice. I really think they'll go back to Jimbo Fisher again or Tom Herman. I know that sounds like you're just looking at the yellow pages for two hot coaches, but I think LSU has the pedigree. They have the money, even though they're going to pay less in his staff, between $8 and $12 million, depending on which lawyer you believe. But I think they'll shoot high if they don't get Jimbo or Tom Herman. I think Lane Kiffin could be in play.
Paul, if SC had to do it again, you figure they might want to keep Orgeron, who was doing a very good job before they brought in Sarkisian, and you saw how that wound up. Is there any chance Orgeron could keep this job? Is there any chance?
I know. I'll never forget being out there. I saw you that weekend when we were out for game day, and Orgeron beat Stanford, and a lot of people thought in November of 13 that he was going to keep his job. And he probably should have, but I don't think he will unless this happens. What if somehow LSU runs the table, beats Saban in Tiger Stadium on the first Saturday in November, and then there's such a coalescing of fan support, player support that the administration has no choice? I think it's extremely unlikely. I've seen this team play a couple of times. I don't think they are that good, and I think Fournette being banged up. But by getting rid of Les now, they've given the team maybe a little bit of energy and can steal a couple of wins. But I think that is highly unlikely.
Paul Feinbaum, I need to switch subjects from LSU to Notre Dame, because Saturday I watched the Duke Blue Devils, not the basketball Duke team, the football Duke team beat Notre Dame. And I saw you on SportsCenter yesterday talking about Brian Kelly, who went on a post-game conference, talked about how nobody is safe, everybody's up for grabs. Now we've learned that he's fired as offensive coordinator. Could you talk to me about, or remind my audience about your thoughts about Brian Kelly and Notre Dame? What the hell is going on in South Bend?
Well, first of all, this is a Duke team that lost to Northwestern and Wake Forest, two football powers, as we all know. You know, for those who didn't hear it, Brian Kelly, after an embarrassing loss for the second straight week at home, blamed his players. He said everyone's on notice. No one's job is safe. He didn't say anything about Brian Van Gorder, who's making over $1.5 million a year and has been a total joke of a defensive coordinator. So what did he do later in the afternoon? He did what all cowardly head coaches do. They fire the coordinator, as if that's going to matter, Stephen A. Think about Brian Kelly's record. After he got destroyed by Alabama a couple of years ago in the national championship game, something like 42-14, he had a 9-4 and an 8-5 season. Last year it got better, but he got just beaten to death in the final game, the bowl game against Ohio State. And this year he's already out of it. I think Brian Kelly's the guy that better watch out for his own job, because I do not like, and I can't imagine anyone like, criticizing your players as if it's their fault when you're the guy making $5 million a year.
This is a man who does not mince words,
That's
Paul
right.
Feinbaum.
That's right. By the way, I meant the defensive coordinator instead of offense coach, so I appreciate the correction. Thank you so much.
Yes, we got it. Paul, thank you so much. Tremendous insight. We really appreciate you making time this morning.
No, the pleasure was mine. Thank you.